So we're back with another Perils in Paradise card review, very near the end here, but today we got some Hunter cards, some new legendaries. Kicking it off here with Sasquatch. This is a 7-mana 4/5 beast, Battlecry repeat each card you played last turn. And we're going to have a handful of Parrots in this set that all kind of have this repeat aspect. We've had a handful of Parrots in the past in Hearthstone that have repeated effects. I will say here, like, the difference in the word between repeat and replay seems noteworthy, but I think it's primarily a flavor difference here after reading some notes from Blizzard on these. So I think you could just kind of read this as replay each card you played last turn for consistency's sake. That means things like, you know, Battlecry minions, for instance, are not going to have their Battlecries going off again. Much like Tess, when she replays a card, any Battlecry minions just get summoned. They don't like activate a Battlecry. Spells probably work as you might expect, but kind of think about this as a Tess, except, you know, of course, it's cards you played last turn. Now, in regards to actually using this card, it's funny I mentioned Tess, because when you think about like Tess's effect versus Sasquatch's effect, Tess feels like she has the opportunity to do like so much more, because it's cards you played this game, and obviously they're like hard to predict and generate because it's from other classes and stuff, so it might be a little bit less reliable, but like the total amount of things you can achieve with a Tess is way higher, whereas with Sasquatch you're often working with you know, sort of a limited mana pool on that previous turn. For instance, if you wanted to play this on curve, you're only looking at a 6 mana turn prior. It might be hard to do a lot of really meaningful things with 6 mana. That said, you know, you're kind of tacking on this bonus 4/5 the following turn. If you have some awesome 6 mana card, we're actually going to see, let's go ahead and take a look at like Death Roll. Looks like a pretty interesting card to repeat. This destroys an enemy minion and then deals damage equal to its attack, split among all. And then like Furious Fowls is a big like 6 mana card too. I don't know if this one's quite as interesting, but you know, it's at least something on curve that's new that you could repeat. I think realistically, if I look at like, you know, Titans, for instance, those might be more interesting, particularly in Priest, because this card's going to be playable in Priest. Of course, thanks to the Tourist, you know, playing an Aman'Thul and then just getting another Aman'Thul off your Sasquatch. Like, that's the sort of thing that's exciting. And I think given the cost of this and the ability for Priest to often survive more into the late game, that does seem more exciting for them than traditionally Hunter. That said, you know, Highlander Hunters have been able to run some bigger things and might still have some solid plays here off the Sasquatch. Now, of course, it doesn't have to be a 6 mana turn. You can go all the way up to 10 mana in Hunter and play this later in the game and try to get yourself like a little 10 mana repeat turn, couple 5 drops or whatever weave together. The possibilities there for Sasquatch are nice. So I think about this as sort of like just a good thing, repeating good effects. I don't think about it as like a build around necessarily. I don't think about it as like a game winning sort of line. It sort of just feels like a good, honest, on curve follow up that will have some moments where it doesn't necessarily line up, because the thing you did on turn 6 might not need to be the thing that you do on turn 7. You know, you may have to wait a couple turns to find the right moment for this, but I think once you find that moment, it's good to replay cards. And you know, if you're cheating, you know, 10 mana of stuff, that's pretty nice, right? That makes Sasquatch feel pretty good. Even cheating 6 mana of stuff, it's kind of like you're getting a 1 mana 4/5 tacked on there on that following turn. So it by no means bad. So I think this is fine. And of course, there might be some weird combos or kooky things that you can do with this as well. So in essence, yeah, this looks solid at a baseline, and it might have some potential if people really start to cook with it, basically. Moving on here to the Chatty Macaw. This one was like leaked in a video previously, but I was saving it for the Hunter Day. 3 mana 3/3 beast and pirate. Battlecry repeat the last spell you cast at an enemy, except this time at a random enemy. And as I just said, like, there are some pretty nice big new spells here. Like, I think Death Roll's pretty intriguing. This has a lot of damage potential, good big removal. The Furious Fowls, again, this is, you know, couple bodies and some removal. These are swingy sorts of cards, and you know, for 3 mana, getting one of these bigger cards feels pretty nice. I don't think it's actually insane, because it's gonna have to happen later in the game. You know, you're talking about this is 5 mana, this is 6 mana. Sure, about like a turn 6, turn 7 sort of play here for the Chatty Macaw as a follow-up. But I think, you know, that still leaves you a lot of mana left behind to do other things. So you use the Chatty Macaw for your big swing, and then you just develop behind that, or follow it up with something, you know, nice and much better. It's also true that this is like pretty targeted in its effect. So, you know, it might be easier to work around this in some ways. You know, for instance, Sasquatch, it's like you got to find the right moment because you want to have the right things that are repeated because it's based on that one specific turn. Chatty Macaw, like, you can kind of look backwards, you know, any given point, whenever the last spell you cast at an enemy was, even if it was like 3 turns ago or whatever, the Chatty Macaw is still good. Like, sometimes you top deck a Sasquatch and it's like, oh man, what did I do last turn? That's not going to make any sense. But the Chatty Macaw kind of has it banked up and it's looking at that specific target, which is nice. That also means you can kind of do other spells in the meantime, as long as they're not being cast at an enemy, and this won't, you know, risk kind of that losing that upside of it. So it's like limited in some ways in what it's useful for, but at the same time, that's useful once you get into a game state, because then that's a much more narrow result and you can play towards that a little bit better. And, you know, like make sure you had a big death roll instead of like a tiny banana or something if you need to cast a banana in the meantime. So I think that's actually pretty cool for the Chatty Macaw. Now, again, I actually think Priest is pretty insane with this as well. Priest just has so many good spells they can cast at enemies, and Hunter's got a couple here that are nice, and I'm sure there's a couple more if we look in the rest of the standard set for Hunter. But I think Priest is really high potential for this. That's going to be a theme today, actually. All of these cards kind of look better to me in Priest than in Hunter, because they're just doing things that Priest cares about, like repeating big effects, big spells. We're going to see some one-drop synergy stuff that's great in Priest with like Astral Automatons. So, I don't know, man. This Hunter set is feeling a lot like a Priest tourist set to me. Moving on here to Death Roll. This is a 5-mana spell. Destroy an enemy minion. Deal damage equal to its attack, randomly split among all enemies. And I think I like this spell, but I'm a little bit torn on it. It's one of those where it's like, if your opponent has a single 8/8 on board, I think this spell is amazing for Hunter, right? You get to clear the 8/8, you get 8 damage to face, and you're so pumped that you got some bonus lethality with your removal. It can also be nice sometimes, like pushing through a taunt for lethals, and you can imagine this being a finisher of sorts. But I think there will be some other board states where this does feel really awkward. Like if the opponent has a board of 3/3s, Death Roll is super bad. Like you just destroy a 3/3 and deal 3 damage. You get an arcane missiles tacked onto it. So this one is almost like meta and matchup situational, so much so that makes me nervous. Like I love the upside on it, especially hilarious. Like, oh, hey, play that 15/15, you know, like I can't wait to death roll that. There's some hilarious and insane results there that are possible. And I bet it's like really, really good in Arena for that reason. It's like, oh, just play your one big thing, you know, and I'll clear it and whittle you down with my hero power and death rolls and stuff. But in Standard, I do worry there's just going to be some awkward board states. And it's also one of those too that's like at 5 mana, it's most of your turns and it's only unlocked in the mid game. So, you know, it does demand that mid to late game impact, and it demands the right sort of threats on board as well. You know, if there's an 8/8 and 2 3/3s, you might still be okay because you probably tidy up those 3/3s very often with the missiles. But you know, there's still some low rolls too. You leave each of those 3/3s at 3/1 and get some wasted face damage or something. You're still sad. So the kind of like mathematical awkwardness on this one might be what holds this one back, despite some of those perfect moments. It's harder for Hunter as a class to wait on those perfect moments, because they don't necessarily have the survivability or the grindiness. Now, that said, once again, Priest can wait on those perfect moments a little more, because Priest tends to have those grindier game plans, those longer survivability game plans, which means they might have more room to wait for those perfect moments for death roll. So could this be a card that pops into like a Reno Priest as a removal with some finisher potential? Yeah, I actually think, once again, it fits a little better in Priest, but still does indeed suffer from awkwardness overall. So not absolutely nuts outside of those really ideal board states. Moving on here to Furious Fowls. This is a 6-mana spell. Choose an enemy and summon 2 3/2 birds with immune while attacking to attack it. So this is, you know, a little board swing card here in essence. This also can notably go face, though, importantly. That's a big distinction, because this can be good on an empty board, could be a finisher, kind of a bad fireball if you're just desperate for some damage in those cases. Now the 3/2s left behind on board do have that additional upside where on future turns they're also immune, so you do get out ahead and can kind of use those to trade in multiple times. That's a really big potential upside. That said, these days, you know, 2 health stuff sticking around post turn 6, it's just so unlikely. There's so much little chippy removal. There's so much rush in any given Hearthstone world these days. Like, you don't ever really expect these to get a second attack off. It's an annoyance. It still requires your opponent to deal with them in some way or another, but it's not a huge annoyance, and I don't think this is particularly efficient either. So I don't know, it almost feels like this one is a little bit reliant on some of those like repeat effects, just like stacking this up over time and kind of hoping you get there on just the raw value of it. But I still don't really think it's all that efficient or all that high output. I think it's, again, okay. Again, maybe a little better in Priest, weirdly enough, but still probably not good enough in Priest either. Moving on to the Pet Parrot. This is a 2-mana 1/1 beast, and Battlecry, repeat the last 1-cost card that you played. And we are going to see a 1-cost card here today that's like solid to repeat. It's a 3/3 with Rush, has a negative battle cry, but as we talked about with repeat, is you're repeating these cards, you're not activating the battle cry, so you know you're kind of getting a nice little 3/3 on it. That's pretty good, and it's like really good on curve for the record. Like, if you open as that as your 1 and then play this as your 2, like, you know, getting 2 3/3s basically in the first 2 turns, each of them with Rush, like that is really, really nice if you hit it on curve for Hunter. And then just to get into Priest really quickly on this one, this is kind of insane in like Astral Automaton Priest, because this just plays you an automaton, and importantly for the automatons, they just need to be summoned to get buffs. So, you know, each little extra bonus automaton is pretty nuts with the Pet Parrot here. So, you know, this could be summoning you giant 6/7s and stuff in the mid game after you've played some automatons early. And Priest is also just getting this real critical mass of like 1-cost bonus stuff that keeps stacking up and stacking up and stacking up, which that might really give like an automaton Priest, for instance, what it needs. We're actually going to see another card here, Bird Watching. Discover a minion from your deck, give all copies of it +2/+1. Again, could be some automaton tutoring stuff. So pretty interesting for Priest, kind of cool for Hunter. I will say Hunter doesn't have a lot of other great targets, I don't think, as far as the repeats are concerned, looking at standard format right now. So if you miss that 3/3 with Rush on turn 1, I'm not sure you're going to love your Pet Parrot any other time later, because ultimately, you know, you're getting a 1/1 body, which is super weak, which means all of the mana cost in this card is really baked into the repeat here on the Battlecry. So you have to make that 1-drop worth it. It has to be a really good effect to be meaningful. And there just aren't that many that are meaningful. You know, like automatons scaling makes them more meaningful, but most cards don't do that. So I think it's kind of clunky outside of some really specific either curve hits, which could be nuts but are risky, or like specific Priest builds, which once again kind of points this card towards Priest to me. So moving on here to Parrot Sanctuary, new location, 2 mana, 3 durability. Your next Battlecry minion costs 1 less. After you play a Battlecry minion, reopen this. So of course some discounts here for all of your various Parrot Battlecries, and I kind of like this location. It's only 2 mana, gives you 3 mana in discounts, so you're kind of netting 1 mana total, but it's also letting you cheat things into play ahead of curve, which is, I think, really important often for discounts. And it's kind of creating a nice little like chain where you probably get, you know, 2 or 3 straight turns of significantly discounted things in the early game, and, you know, lets you cheat out potentially a, you know, bigger 7-cost Sasquatch a turn early, that sort of thing. Although I don't know if you really want your Sasquatch being cheated out too early, because he wants to have some mana baked into his effect, obviously. But it's just a nice little, like, I'm gonna front load this 2 mana now, and then I'm just gonna really push hard in the next few turns, which for decks that have a curve that's hitting, you know, the power band in those next few turns with some big battle cries, like playing a 4-cost battle cry on turn 3, right? Like, that's actually pretty nice. Playing a 5-cost battle cry on turn 4, that can be good. And again, I actually think it works relatively well in Priest. Priest has, you know, good battle cry effects like all classes. Hunter, of course, also, though, and I think it makes sense in Hunter too, especially with the Parrots. But even beyond that, this is not limited by any means to Parrot decks. So all in all, yeah, I think this looks like a nice little cost cheating tempo advantage Parrot Sanctuary, which sacrificing a little tempo on 2 is fine if you're going to have those big swings in the mid game. So moving on to the tourist for Hunter. I kind of usually do the legendaries fast, but that set all kind of went together. This is Ranger Gilly. He is a 6 mana 4/6. He is the warrior tourist. So if you add this to your Hunter deck, you can run warrior cards from Perils in Paradise. And he also reads at the end of your turn, get a 2/3 Crocolisk, and then Death Rattle, give all minions in your hand +2/+3. So a little bit of like value generation, just giving you at least a body to work with the Crocolisk. And then this Death Rattle hand buff. It is a big hand buff as 2/3, but I will say this is a 6-cost card, and it's a Death Rattle on the hand buff. All of that is very slow and a little bit risky comparative to, like, you know, hand buff Paladin's been very good lately, and it gets going much faster with its hand buffs, and often they're kind of as big, or, you know, Painter's Virtue has 3/3, and it takes a little while to get that one moving, but still actually gets done faster than your Ranger Gilly. So it's still faster. And then you get Muscleotron too, the Forge guy. He's faster, you know, forge him on 2, play him on 3. You got +2/+2 already for your hand. So Gilly just seems a lot slower. Now there are some like Death Rattle synergies, obviously in Hunter. There's ways to get extra Death Rattles out of this and stuff, but that's even more expensive, even more delayed, pushing that even later into the game, which again, for these hand buff decks, you can't wait too long on the hand buffs. It's sometimes hard to swing hard enough. And I will say Paladin too is a class with tons of swing, because they have a lot of Divine Shield, Lifesteal, and Rush all paired together, so they can kind of fall behind a little bit and still pull it back. Might be harder for Hunter to do that, even with the help here of some warrior cards, but maybe warrior has a package that allows all of this to get a little greedier, a little more late game. Maybe some taunts come in or something, which can help you stabilize, but I still don't think they help you stabilize as well as like Rush, Lifesteal, and Divine Shield. Paladin had the sort of perfect recipe for the hand buff stuff, and I just don't see that happening in Hunter. Now, I don't want to write off any tourist card, because the ability to run extra cards is really valuable, but do warrior cards traditionally synergize with Hunter? No. Have most tourists had synergistic packages with the other class? Maybe so far. I guess I think some have, but not actually all have. So will warrior come in and actually save this card? I don't know, man. This to me looks like the clunkiest tourist to actually play, and it's so strange just giving you like a 2/3 Crocolisk. Like, yeah, okay, you can get 2 Crocolisks if it lives multiple turns. It's like, is that really you want it to die? You don't want multiple Crocolisks off it, probably. So I don't know, man. I just don't really see it with this one. This just looks very awkward to me. So moving on to the last few cards here in Hunter. This is kind of a grab bag. I don't think these are really too synergistic together. They have some combos, I guess. Catch of the Day we talked about a little bit. 1 mana 3/3 Beast with Rush, and Battlecry summon a 2/1 Worm for your opponent. So you know, in a vacuum, you presumably trade this 3/3 into the 2/1. You've kind of got yourself a 1 mana 3/1. I actually don't think that's terrible. Obviously there are ping effects and various hero powers and stuff that can tidy that up, but that's honestly sometimes not a disaster if your opponent ends up pinging your 1-drop. And then there are going to be some lines with like Trusty Fishing Rod here, where you have, you know, this nice 1 attack, and you can kind of clean up the Delicious Worm. I actually don't think that's all that exciting either. We already talked about repeating your 1-drop Catch of the Day here so that it doesn't activate its battle cry. That's a little bit better feeling, but still super specific curve hit for that one to feel good. So you know, without specifically deactivating this battle cry, Catch of the Day is pretty tough. Oh, I also didn't mention the Fishing Rod, of course. Summoning the 1 cost means it's not going to have the battle cry, so it's kind of like a 1-2 punch here as far as fitting well with the Catch of the Day Delicious Worm. But interestingly, this is a 3 mana card, only 2 durability. That's kind of hard to line up. That means you're going to be waiting on this one sometimes until like turn 4, and then the 3/3 is a little less impactful. So I don't know, man. Clunky is again the word that just comes to mind for this one. Like, I don't really want to play this on turn 1 necessarily. It kind of holds up in like turns 2 and 3, where, you know, maybe you clear a 3/3 and you leave behind that 2/1 because you don't mind. You're not as threatened by that. And it's like slightly better at trading up. But that's still weird. I think you want this to be aggressive traditionally in Hunter, but it's just not that good at doing it. So I don't know, man. All of these cards kind of go together, but at the same time feel weird because this is a 3-mana card. I guess we'll just go ahead and talk about it. Trusty Fishing Rod, 3-mana 1/2. After your attack, summon a 1-cost minion from your deck. So in Hunter, this seems so high cost for what it is. Like, yes, cheating 1 cost into play is worth mana, but in Hunter, it's not really. There's not that many good 1-drops. There's like Costume Singer that's decent, but I don't think I'm like over the moon about that. And then a lot of the 1 costs have effects you lose. Like, you know, I lost my finale. Shoot, I'm sad about that, you know. Jeweled Macaw, I lost my Battle Cry. I'm sad about that. So once again, I'm pointed to Priest with Astral Automaton. It feels like they just printed an Astral Automaton card here because this is basically a way to tutor out your Automaton if it's stuck in your deck, which is really, really valuable for that sort of deck. Sometimes you want to like create copies and stuff of your automatons, but you can't find the first one to like get the chain going. This makes sure you can find the first one, so then you can use copy effects to add some to hand, and you can use pip to copy those, etc., etc., etc. This is just a way to like really reliably dig that out of your deck, and sometimes summon a big automaton in the process too if you've already had, you know, a little chain going. So I don't know, to me, like, more interesting in Priest. I'm not even sure it makes the cut, but it feels like it could. Hunter, I just don't, right now, I just don't see the 1-drops. There's always the world where they get printed in the future. I don't think the 3/3 is worth it though, because I think this is just too awkward in every other scenario, and I don't think playing such a bad weapon is going to be worth it just for this 3/3 with Rush. So I don't know, man. It's just once again kind of weird. And then finally, we have Bird Watching. I actually do like this card quite a bit. This is a 2-mana spell here. Discover a minion from your deck and give all copies of it +2/+1. We had seen these sorts of effects in the past with Hunter. I don't remember exactly what we were calling that deck, but it was basically a big beast Hunter where you'd create like multiple copies of your King Crushes and stuff. There was that 4-mana card that did this same sort of thing. There was the 2-mana card. Here we go. I found at least War Song Wrangler. This is what I'm talking about, right? We had some stuff with this, which is literally the same effect. The question is, right, like, were you happy to pay a 2-mana 3/4 on top of this? 2-mana 3/4 sounds okay, but it's nice that this can weave in much earlier and can kind of get the gears turning a lot faster as well. Also, keep in mind, this is not like Discover a Beast, it's Discover a Minion, which is in some cases worse because it's less specific. You can't use it as easily for a tutor, like if you want to run lots of minions, but also it does give it more flexibility for something like Priest to run in that case. So could be nice for automatons if you're able to build a deck with few enough minions that this hits consistently or just helps you find that automaton payoff sooner. That's another possibility for Bird Watching. Or just finding, good on curve stuff, getting a little bonus stat in the process, find a 3-drop. It's got a nice stat line attached to it. And that could sometimes make it worth weaving this in. So, yeah, I think these kind of like find your cards is good. I don't know that the buff scaling over multiple bodies is necessarily all that important. Just finding your stuff, finding good cards. The stats are there to me almost like to help this keep up from sacrificing the 2 mana. But I think this is flexible enough to see some play. Yeah, there you go. Those are our Hunter cards. Now let's rate these from 1 to 5 stars. Sasquatch is a 4-star card. Chatty Macaw is a 4-star card. Death Roll is a 3-star card. Furious Fowls is a 3-star card. Pet Parrot is a 3-star card. Parrot Sanctuary is a 4-star card. Ranger Gilly is a 2-star card. Catch of the Day is a 2-star card. Bird Watching is a 4-star card. Trusty Fishing Rod is a 3-star card. And really just in Priest. Most of these scores, honestly, were for Priest. If most of them for Hunter, you would take 1 point off, frankly. But I think they have potential in Priest. And there you go. That's it for this review, folks. Let me know what you think about these cards down below. Are you excited for these in Hunter in some way? Or are these just a bunch of Priest cards? I want to hear your takes. That said, thanks for watching. And until next time, game on.